Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it comes from a translation of a message, and the narration of that voice note reads like this. Hello, Brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post my own story as hidden identity? I am a woman who has never been married in her life, and I have come here on your platform so that I can tell you the story that I was told by my own mom before she had passed away. At that time, I thought that maybe my mom, she was full of bitterness and anger because of the way that my father had dumped her, and my mother, she was just a side chick. But soon after my mother had passed away, then my mother's kids started to die one by one. My mother had 4 kids with my late father, including me, and I am the only one who is remaining. The other 4, all of my siblings, they have since passed away. The story that my mother told me goes on like this. My mom told me that when she got married, she was happy. She was staying with her first husband, who was a mechanic. So her husband then went and started working for my father. This was like way before my mother had even fallen pregnant. When he was now working for my late father, that was when my mother one day came to the place where her late husband was working. That was when she saw the boss, who was my late father. And then my late father was now lasting after my mother. They started speaking, and my mother, because my father had so much money, started cheating on her husband, and then they agreed that they were supposed to sacrifice they were supposed to sacrifice her first husband, because he had found out that this is what his boss had been doing. The boss was now sleeping with his wife. So since my late father was someone who used a lot of charms, it didn't even take them a long time before my mother's first husband had passed away. He was then buried. When he was buried, when my mother was still going through that mourning period, that she was already sleeping with my father. That is how I was born. She fell pregnant in that same year that she lost her first husband. When I was born, my mother, she was then taken to another place, and that is the place where we grew up at. My late father had bought a property for her here in Harare, but we were kept as a secret. The rest of my father's relatives, they knew everything, that my mother was a side chick. It was only that the first wife was the one who was always kept in the dark. Since she was the one who was always kept in the dark, my mother and my late father, everything that they were doing, my late father was trusting my mother more, since she had kept a lot of his secrets. When my mother was 29 years old, that was when she said that she was taken to this other traditional healer. At that time, my father, most of his buses, they kept on having accidents, and she said that when she was taken to that traditional healer accompanying my late father, it was in the year 1997. So when they went there, then that traditional healer told my late father that the reason as to why he was not being successful in business, it was because, unlike his own grandfather, he had refused some of the items that had been given to him at the time when his grandfather had passed away. He said, I do not want to become a ritualist, but the traditional healer, according to my mother, said, you cannot deny your own DNA. You cannot deny. Can you open up your body and let all of your blood to fall out of your body? If you can do that, then you will be able to tell me that you do not want to become like your grandfather, because the blood that flowed in his veins, it is the same blood that now flows in your own veins. Therefore, you cannot deny. That was when it was said that my father accepted that he wanted to also become a ritualist. My mother said that they quickly had to do some passports. After they had done some passports, first of all, they went to Zambia. But when they were in Zambia, they were then directed to Angola. So they flew to Zambia, then to Angola. This they did at the time before my father had lost his last bus. When they returned back to Zim, that was when they found out that my father's bus, the last one that was remaining, it had an accident, and now my father was on the verge of going broke. They returned back to Angola. When they went there to Angola, that was when my father was taken to this other cave. When he was taken to that cave, he was then told that in that cave, he was supposed to sleep in that cave for 6 good days without eating anything, without urinating, without doing anything. All that he was supposed to do was to rest, to sleep for 6 good days. He was then told that on the 6th day in that cave, what he was supposed to do was that he had to do some poo as well as to urinate on top of that poo. And after urinating on top of that poo, he was supposed to eat his own poo. Then on that same day at night, there was a snake that was suddenly going to appear, and this snake, it was not going to harm him, and he was told that even though this snake was not going to harm him, he was not allowed to attempt to touch it until the day that the traditional healer was going to come and take him. So that traditional healer then went to that cave where my father was after he had eaten his own poo. The traditional healer then entered into that cave where that my father was staying for 6 good days, and the traditional healer then took the snake and handed it over to my father. The traditional healer then told my father that this snake, at the time when you are going to arrive back at the garage where you have your old buses, what I want you to do is that I want you to select any of your old buses, those ones that were no longer moving, and place it underneath one of them and sleep in that bus even if it is cold. I do not want you to wear a blanket. I do not want you to wear anything. You have to spend the whole night sitting in that old bus naked with that snake underneath that bus. Then early in the morning, you are supposed to wake up at least somewhere around 3 a.m. for the money that this snake is going to vomit. It is going to be a lot, so you need to wake up really early so that you can start hiding the money. By the time that the sun will be rising, make sure that you would have hidden all of this money for 2 more good days. This money that you would have gathered, the money that would have been vomited by that snake, it is not supposed to be placed in a place where there is light. You have to cover it at least with a blanket or something to keep the money in a dark place. And this was what my mother and my father did. My mother told me that when they flew back to Zambia and they flew back to Zim, she was in support of everything that my father was doing. My mother told me that through the airports, she actually saw that the snake, it had coiled itself around my father's waist, but no one saw what was going on. This snake kept on moving around my father's waist when they were traveling from Angola. When they arrived in Harare, it was late at night. They then went straight to my late father's garage, and then my mother slept in the car. Then my father got off and he then started stripping himself naked, and he went into the bus after he had placed that snake underneath this other bus that he had selected. When the morning came, that was when my mother and my father discovered that this snake, it had vomited a lot of money, and this snake, it had suddenly disappeared. That traditional healer had told my father that when this would have happened, he was supposed to return back to that other traditional healer who was from Zim so that he can be given further instructions, since he was unable to always travel between Angola and Zim. So my father and my mother, after they had locked up the money in my father's office, they then traveled and then they went back to that traditional healer and they told the traditional healer everything that had happened. My father was then given further instructions. They were taken to this other mountain. My mother told me that it was quite a scary place. My mother said that when they were walking in that mountain, it felt as if it was late at night, because this mountain, it had a lot of tall trees, such that the trees, the way that they have their branches locked up with each other, they do not even allow the sunlight to go through the trees, so it is always dark. My mother said that when they were busy walking in that mountain, she saw two witches that were naked, that were performing some rituals. My mother was then told by the traditional healer not to keep on looking, for these were the things of the forbidden mountain that she was not supposed to focus her eyes on, otherwise she was going to get lost in that same mountain. When they finally arrived at this other cave, that is where the cave where my father was supposed to continuously come and perform his rituals, my mother said that whenever it will be time, my mother will drive my father back to that forbidden mountain that is there in Mutoko, and when they would have traveled there, my mother will be sleeping in the car for 2 good days when my father will be in that cave. I asked my mother, what was my late father doing in that cave all alone in that forbidden mountain? My mother said that the story that she was told by my father was that whenever you will be in that cave, there will be 2 old witches that would come. These 2 old witches, whenever they would come, then they will start making love to him. After doing that, then they will start sucking his blood. My father said that it was quite a painful thing to do, and whenever he would complain about the way that they were biting him, then they will beat him up, and they will say that for you to receive these spiritual gifts, you also need to give something. And he was giving these witches power by letting them suck up his blood. Then my father and my mother were then told that they were supposed to bury this snake at their garage, and after they had buried this snake at their garage, my mother said that they dug a hole that was 1 meter going down, and after they had buried that snake, one of the old buses disappeared. And this bus, the way that my mom said, she said that this bus, they saw it as it was going into the earth, as if God had opened up the earth, and after that the earth then buried that bus. Even up until today, I still believe that the bus is still there, because the garage that used to belong to my father, one of my half brothers, who is the eldest son in the family, is the one who is running the place. But now he is not doing this business of having buses, but rather he is having these trucks. He is always transporting chrome, iron ore, as well as coal from Hwange, taking them to South Africa. He's making a lot of money, but I suspect, and I strongly suspect, that my brother knows that he's still using these rituals, but this is a story for another day. So my mom then told me that after they had performed these rituals for years and years, unfortunately, that was when that man there in Angola was killed, because when there was this war that was there in Angola, he had fought on the other side, the losing side, and after the rebels had taken over, he was amongst the other villagers who had been assassinated. This is exactly what had happened. And after that man from Angola had passed away, that was when the charms that my father had been given by that man started to lose their power. When they started to lose their power, they started demanding blood each and every time. When my father would go back to Mutoko, to that forbidden mountain, my father, when he will climb down the mountain, my father will be heavily beaten up. He will be having a swollen face, because those witches, they were just beating him up for no reason at all. Sometimes they would make love to him, and when he will be about to finish up, then they will start beating him up and laugh at him as he will be busy ejaculating. This is how my father was being tortured by those witches. My father was then given another deal by those two old witches. They told him that you can supply the blood of your relatives, you can supply the blood of your own children. Since you go around sleeping with all these women, why don't you just kill them off one by one, because you do not want your wife to know. So my father then betrayed my mother, because when he did this deal with the devil, he did not inform my own mother. So my mother kept on supporting my mother. So my mother kept on supporting my father each and every time when they would go for a ritual, sacrificing one amongst my father's kids. My mother was present, and she did not know that this thing, the sacrifices, even her own kids were going to be sacrificed one day. That is how my mother and my father started hating each other. And when my father was beaten by his tokoloshis because he had failed to sacrifice in time, he was now growing old and he wanted to protect his children. So he went and he visited another traditional healer who promised that he was going to give him some more tokoloshis. So he was given 4 more tokoloshis on top of those ones that he had. And when he returned back, and when that snake said, "It is time, my friend, to give me more blood," but my father said, "No, this time around, I do not want you to cause any accidents." What this snake will do is that when my father's buses, when they will be traveling on the road, the snake will suddenly appear in front of the bus or just close to where the driver will be sitting. Then the driver will be terrified, because the driver will say, "I am going to die. This is a black mamba that has suddenly appeared in front of me and it wants to bite me." Then as the bus driver will be in shock. Most of the times, that is when the driver will sometimes drive himself out of the bridge, or the bus will just go and hit a tree, and people will wonder what would have happened to the bus driver. My father's buses had once been banned, but through corruption, he got his buses back on the road because they were killing a lot of people. Whenever it was Easter or December time, any holiday, festive season, my father's buses, they were always on the news because they were killing a lot of people. Blood was needed. And my father was more than happy, my mother said, to provide the blood that was needed. My father passed away, and after that, my mother followed him. When my father passed away, I can say 2 years later, that was when my mother died, and she kept on complaining as she was saying that she would see the ghost of my father, and my father would force my mother to have intercourse with her. That was when she died. When she died, I didn't want to look at her private parts, but people who watched her, they said that my mother's private parts, they were rotting, they were decaying whilst she was still alive. Right now, as a family, we are trying to fix this mess, but the problem is that one of our late father's eldest son, my half-brother, he does not want that. We tried to tell him to take us to this other prophet so that we can have a one-on-one session with that prophet who is quite popular here in Zim. But my elder brother said that, that prophet, he once asked for some money when he wanted to start his own trucking company, and I gave him the money. So even if we go there, he's not going to help you. He did not say, Brother Nashi, he did not say that he is going to help us. He said that he cannot help you, meaning that he is part of that problem. He is not affected by these tokoloshis. These tokoloshis, they are affecting us, Brother Nashi. Like my half-sisters that have their houses there in Senton, they are always complaining, and they tell me that their own husbands, they do not have any power in bed. They suffer from erectile dysfunction. The rest of us who are my late father's kids, we all have the same dreams. There is always a short man that comes to sleep with us, and as for the boys, they always see this old woman that will come and have intercourse. From there on, it will be erectile dysfunction for the boys. And as for me, I suffer from this thing that is called low libido. I can go for years, Brother Nashi, without ever wanting to have sexual intercourse with a man. I am just like that. I even tried to put myself on medication so that I can at least have a high libido, but still that tokoloshes, it destroys everything in my body. Dear listeners, right there was a message that was sent to me by one of our dear sisters, and right there was a narration of that message. Strange things do happen in this world. She even told me the name of that bus company, but she said, no, please don't mention the name of that bus company because it might put me in trouble. Strange things do happen in this world.